All right, with that out the way, let's finally deep dive into Flashpoint. If you've never read the comic, like I said at the top, it's all good. We got you covered. Or if it's been a minute since you last read it, like myself, I'm going to go ahead and kick things off with a quick recap of the story. Consider this like a crash course into a Flashpoint. All right, music will play. Let me take a swig before I start. All right, here we go. Flashpoint is written by award-winning and New York Times best-selling writer, film and TV producer, and showrunner Jeff Johns. The man has added a few accolades to his name since I last checked. You've also got art duties handled by comic book royalty like the incomparable Andy Kubert, and breathtaking inking and coloring work handled by Sandra Hope and Alex Sinclair, respectively. The story starts off with Barry Allen waking up at his desk and discovering the world he knows has drastically changed. His family is alive, but former loved ones are strangers, and close friends are either different, gone, or worse off. This twisted version of this world is also on the brink of a cataclysmic war brewing between Emperor Aquaman's forces and Wonder Woman's devastating army of Furies. And to make matters worse, Earth's greatest heroes, the Justice League, the team that the Flash is on, well, they're nowhere to be found in this iteration of the world he's woken up in. It's a world where America's last hope lies in the hands of Cyborg and the few and fractured heroes of this world that still remain. Like Batman. But it's not the Batman you know. This one's way more brooding, if that was even possible. He's way more violent, and he's not even Bruce Wayne. He's actually Bruce Wayne's dad, Thomas Wayne. And he's got a 5 o'clock shadow, which might be the most surprising aspect of all of this. That was the biggest sign. That's not the Batman I know. Anyways, this world is clearly running out of time, and it's up to the Flash to find the villain responsible for flipping everything on its head. Now, spoiler warning on this 12-year-old comic, but an important plot point nonetheless. The real culprit and reason for this messed up world is none other than Barry Allen himself. All right, that's some real Michael Jackson staring at the man in the mirror, asking him to change his ways. All right, it's all because of Barry. You see, Barry Allen decided to break every single time travel rule that movies like Back to the Future has taught us. He makes a brash decision based on grief and regret, and he goes back in time to prevent the death of his mother from the hands of his arch nemesis, Reverse Flash, who is a diabolical son of a bitch, all right, for lack of better terms. He is diabolical, pure evil, and super convoluted. So that is a discussion for another day. But at the end of the day, it's Barry's haphazard attempt to change the past that fractures the timeline, and it's up to him to correct the past before he loses everything he's ever loved for good. End scene, that's the gist of the story in a nutshell. But if you're unfamiliar with how comic events of this magnitude work, especially any publisher-wide crossover events dealing with alternate timeline stories, Flashpoint was a monster event. It consisted of a total 61-issue run. The series crossed over with other titles and DC characters, and there were 16 separate 3-issue miniseries. Don't ask me to do 16 times 3 right now, because I would fail, but it's a lot. That's a lot of comic books that spun out of this event. And they each told isolated stories about this new world, as well as the altered heroes and villains. You just got more in depth the further away you got from the core series. So if we wanted to cover Flashpoint in totality, we'd honestly need to start a whole new and separate podcast to cover the whole thing in detail. All right. That actually might be what we use our Patreon money for, is to start a spinoff. It'd be costly. So for today's intents and purposes, we're only going to stick with the core 5-issue story arc of Flashpoint. If I went any further than that, I think Ed would just quit the show. All right, he'd be like, "I'm taking whatever leave Ashley."
That's all I read. So I mean, I didn't read any of those other issues. So
you're in the right place, Ed, because that's where the main story takes place, and that's where we're going to live today. But that is, for the most part, everything you need to know going into the rest of this review. Reading the story, it's not required for this episode, but we always recommend you check out the comic for yourself, which you can do on a few different. You got some options to do so. You can read it on the DC Universe app like I did. You could read it on Comixology. If you got a library card, it's available on Hoopla and Libby. And for sure, you can purchase the book at your local comic shop if you prefer a physical book as well. So with that out the way, I think the stage is set for our review. Gents, is this your first? I'm sorry. Is this anyone's first time reading it? Ed, is this your first time?
No.
Oh, okay.
Second time.
Second time. Yeah. Greg, what about you?
Second time.
Sounds like Second time here as well. So we're all kind of, I guess, on in the same boat. What do you guys remember from your first time reading it, Greg? Greg, were you reading this real time when it came out in 2011?
Yeah, I think I was. It was, the scuttlebutt of the local comic book shop. Everyone was talking about Flashpoint. Everyone was, discussing it like at your local water cooler when everyone came in on Wednesday to see, what was going on with Barry. It was huge, and like you said, it reached multiple different series. It had an insane amount of tie-ins that was borderline too much, and it was a fun conversational piece that we haven't really seen. We hadn't seen for sure when it came out, and so that was what made it more exciting and kind of fun to keep up with. As it came out, like you wanted to be in the shop that day when it came out to talk about it with other nerds.
Well said. Ed, what do you remember about this? Were you working at the shop, Ed, when this came out?
No, I wasn't really. This was kind of, I was on comic hiatus for a while. I got back into it a few years after this. So I did, when I came back, when I started working in the comic shop was maybe a couple years into New 52.
Okay.
So then working there, okay, well, I should read this.
So you saw the aftermath.
Yeah.
Got it.
And all the cheers and jeers for the New 52 in general. So I was like, what does this mean? I didn't know what any of it meant. I was like, what's New 50? I didn't know anything because I've been out of the game for so long. So when I came back in, and then, of course it's, Andy Kubert and Jeff Johns, I think I just read the Green Lantern Rebirth with Jeff Johns. I was like, oh man, I'll check it out. This art's good. I'll see what all the fuss is about, because that was still a big event. So I just grabbed the trade and read it then.
I think at that time, I wasn't. At that time, I was already buying anything with Jeff Johns' name on it, and I mean Andy Kubert is like a top 5 artist for me. Top 10 if not top 5 artists. So it was like this just was a power group. It's like this is, and the way, and I vaguely remember thinking this was going to be the equivalent of this was going to be DC's Age of Apocalypse, was like the vibe I was getting. Was this was a post-apocalyptic story. Characters, all the promo had showed Emperor Aquaman. He's got the scar on his face. Wonder Woman's looking crazy. Batman has got the 5 o'clock shadow, so
red
extra
eyes.
scary. Yeah, red eyes.
Didn't bother you? It's the 5 o'clock shadow.
Yeah, it's the red eyes for me, Badr.
Him shooting pistols at everybody. Wait a minute, that 5 o'clock shadow's weird.
I don't trust that.
I'm cool with the rest of it.
I don't trust that beard. Hold on.
He shaves every other day. That's fine.
It looks scratchy.
It's so uncomfortable.
But I remember my first time reading it was really enjoyable. I remember thinking how edgy, how cool it was. It looked beautiful. I can't recall all of the different spinoffs I was reading, but I know I read the Aquaman spinoff and the Wonder Woman spinoff, because I just wanted to understand the whole story. I was interested in going into all the different corners and nooks and crannies, and finding out how this character has changed, what this team is up to in this world, and all the different shakeups that were going on in this. So this has definitely got a fond place for me. And even to this day, despite the fact that aside from New 52, DC also had another, they did another big relaunch in 2016 with DC Rebirth, also written by Jeff Johns.
Right.
But to this day, the way I kind of view DC continuity, or at least my readership, is still pre New 52 and post 52, and and when you consider that Flashpoint is the catalyst for that launch and that era of books, it's definitely integral, I think, to my relationship with DC. Okay. Go ahead, Greg.
No, I was going to say, it's just Jeff Johns was kind of the architect for almost 10 years at DC of he did Flashpoint, he did Rebirth, New 52, Doomsday Clock. He was this giant puppeteer, just making this whole intricate multi-universe story. And, Flashpoint, I don't know if they expected it to be as gigantic as it is. They really, no pun intended, caught lightning in a bottle and we're just like, okay, let's just go with it. And then they tried to duplicate it a few times over the years to, you know, whatever success you want to call it. But I mean, Flashpoint really was this huge pivotal thing that I think multiple publishers looked at and was just like, okay, how can we copy what they just did and do it over here? So, you know, to everyone listening, Flashpoint is a gigantic freaking deal.
I'm glad you said that about catching lightning in a bottle, because this is one of those plot points where in this day and age, we've seen it's not a completely like new idea. Like I think even the CW Flash show did their interpretation of Flashpoint, right?
Right.
And I feel like there's another instance I can't recall off the top of my head, but Barry Allen going back in time to fix something and then having a butterfly effect feels like it is not a brand new idea in today's day and age. But if you put yourself in 2011, I could be wrong, and maybe a very diehard Flash or DC fan will correct me. But isn't it wild to think that in 2011 this was the first time they considered doing this story, like Flash going back in time to save his mom, and this having impacts to the timeline? Like, is there any other instance that you guys can think of Flash doing this and it having an impact this, maybe not this big, because I think what Greg said is perfect. This is kind of an outlier, but I guess how often does Flash go back in time and fuck things up?
Even that too.
Was that a trope because of this series, or is that always kind of been a thing?
I think this definitely has to be heavy influence, because there's been multiverse shenanigans for a while, but this is different because it's the same timeline. It's not, because I think, like, I don't know what the show is, but I know the movie he's like running into another version of himself, where this is like his current timeline is being fractured.
Right.
And he's getting memories of what he remembers and then what this new reality is, basically fighting. The memories are fighting each other. So it's a unique a take on it, because it's not just, oh, that's just Flash from Earth 85.
Yeah, this is not an alternate.
Cucumbers. Yeah, you know, it's all, you know, it's nothing like that. It's not like a write off, like, oh, well, that was Superman from, he's in the crime syndicate, so he's the bad guy. He just looks exactly the same. Or someone with a goatee is the bad guy from another. You know, this is like the same reality that's basically being fractured in a huge way for what seems like one person. You know, because that's when I first read it, or when I first thought about it, I was like, man, is Flash's mom really this instrumental for like everything going to shit?
Super pivotal.
It's like, geez, who is this lady? But
She bakes a mean cake.
I know. It's like, man, so if lives, Aquaman and Wonder Woman fight across the earth, pretty much destroying it. Man, that's wild stakes. But it's
Barry's mom
unique.
makes a mean
I guess
apple
so.
pie.
Yeah.
And when she died, the recipe died too, right? And Barry's like, I got to go back and restore my mom.
Well, to add on to that, think about this. If Bruce dies, his parents turn into either the Joker or another version of Batman. It's just like, how integral are these like little kids to the survival of, I don't know, millions of other people?
And he couldn't kill Hitler on the way back.
Yeah, seriously.
Hey, get Hitler and then come get your mom good. And come back.
The apple pie recipe priority first, right? All right. What would you guys say are the larger themes and topics introduced or explored in the story? Let's start off with that, and then I want to talk about the creative team. Any themes or topics that pop out of your mind?
I think really the hero's hubris of, you know, I can fix anything.
Fix anything. Yeah.
And
This guy's good, Ed. This guy's good. Hubris? That's a good
I'm
word.
telling you,
That's
man,
very good.
I did
Hubris.
a bunch of homework for this show because I didn't look like a fucking idiot. But I mean, that's the main one that hit me right in the head of just like Flash is, in any superhero really, of just like, I have these great powers, that means I can probably fix anything. And then you go to fix something and you just fuck it up even worse. Like, so that's the one that just smacked me right across the face.
And
That's a good one.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll that's a good one, and I want to add grief and regret. Right, like there's only so much we can handle and do with grief and regret. Like things that, you know, a lot of times like an internal journey when you lose someone or you've got regrets. Like a lot of times it's up to you to like resolve that in a positive way. But when you've applied those things to superheroes who have the ability, like Greg, you said, like to fix things, that makes for an interesting story. And I think that's what I think Jeff Johns tapping into that made for a really good story. I just repeated myself twice, but yeah, I'm gonna say grief and regret were like were pretty large themes. Because I mean, Flash wouldn't have done that if he didn't have these feelings,
Right.
and then obviously the temptation with power. Ed, what about you?
Yeah, it's kind of encapsulating what you said, because even like when we did that Black Adam thing, this is like the 5 stages of grief. You know, it's basically he's going through all these cycles, but then you have to accept that you can't change the past, and you have to understand that even terrible things kind of shape who you are.
Right.
You know, when you get older. So just because, and just even like seeing the Spider-Man movie, it's kind of like that, you know, lesson in there. It's like the Spider-Verse movie, but yeah, it's just I can't say it any better than you, Greg, but it's just like, oh, I have all these powers, I can go back and I can make everything perfect, and you can't.
No.
It just if you can't fix one, you know, it's like you fix one broken thing, something else and it never ends, and you just end up going mad and becoming the villain.
And like what is perfect really? Because like honestly, Barry may have had a perfect life because his mom was there and he was happy, but his dad died of a heart attack.
Yeah.
And like,
so you lose something.
You're always going to lose something. And like, just because you have the perfect life doesn't mean that you created the perfect life for someone else.
It's the law of equivalent exchange, like the Full Metal Alchemist.
Yep. As Jeff Johns and that big brain of his just making it all happen.
And it's really, I mean, obviously, it's very selfish and narrow-minded on Barry's part. But I think that's what, you know, you shoot him some bail because you're like, man, if I had the power to go back in time, think of all the shit I'd probably, you know, fix and all the caution that I would throw to the wind. I think that's why this story, the premise for the story is fascinating. Even though I personally felt like it took a little bit to get to that point, but I'll get into more of my pros and cons here in a sec. Let's talk about the creative team before we dive any further into the story. Because we talked a little bit about Jeff Johns, and I agree with what Greg was saying. It feels like Jeff Johns, this might be a poor comparison, but you guys tell me. I've always felt like if Brian Michael Bendis and people like Joe Quesada and who's the other guy from Marvel Knights? Help me out here. Jimmy Palmiotti. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So, sorry. So when I think of like Brian Michael Bendis, Joe Quesada, and Jimmy Palmiotti on the Marvel side, I view them as like the architects, right? Like Jimmy and Joe with Marvel Knights, and then obviously Brian Michael Bendis being a big player among other writers, obviously. But Brian Michael Bendis kind of being like the front runner for a lot of like the big Marvel events. Your House of M's. I don't think Civil War was his brainchild, but like House of M kind of really kicking that era of like big Marvel events. Jeff Johns, I mean, he's got 2. I mean, I don't think he's got the number, maybe the volume, maybe so. I mean, I know he's done like Blackest Night, and it felt like there was always a big Green Lantern event when he was writing it. But like the 2, when you consider that he wrote Flashpoint, which launched, you know, New 52, and then that Rebirth, like he was brought back to once again restart the DC universe. That's pretty fucking epic, you know. Like on top of being a really good writer, the fact that they call him into like, you know, he's kind of like they're smoking a gun, like, you know, Jeff Johns is like DC's ace in the hole. Let's bring him in to you know, write a really good story to set a new stage.
Like, we're starting over, Jeff. Come in here.
That's like when Marvel calls up Jonathan Hickman, just like, hey, we need some graphs and charts, man.
Exactly. Thank you. Jeff Johns is who DC calls for that level of like, you know, we want to get a blockbuster out there. We want to like get some hype and you know, make sure that these books sell. I've been a fan of Jeff Johns since like his 2005 Green Lantern run. And I cannot stress how important that series was to like my comic journey. That was like that and Planet Hulk were the first 2 books I ever put on my own comic pull list. Like Jeff Johns could do no wrong to me. From Blackest Night to DC Rebirth, I think he's a cornerstone for DC Comics. He's been integral to, like I said, all the wide restarts and initiatives. Yeah. And I don't know why. Point blank. There we go. Like full stop. Period. I don't know what. I just had to give him his props. But Ed, what about you, man? What's your relationship with what's your relationship with Jeff Johns?
I think the first thing, and I haven't read it in a while, but I think it is the Green Lantern Rebirth, where like the storyline with Parallax, and he's basically goes crazy, and he has all the rings like a lunatic on the cover.
Yeah,
and I think it's all kind of melds together with me, like the Blackest Night stuff and all that like the Green Lantern work was really good. Flashpoint I enjoyed a lot, but I really think like that Green Lantern work is probably the peak, in my personal opinion. But
you know what? I'd also be remiss. The more I'm thinking about it, right? Because I got a spotlight right on me right now, so I'm having to catch up memories. But the more I think about it, even before Green Lantern, I mean, Jeff Johns is a writer I respect because he sticks with a series really long. Like he writes a full on series. I mean, you consider his JSA run, his Teen Titans run. I mean, hell, his Flash run, like the Flash work he was doing with Scott Collins before doing Flash Rebirth or even Flashpoint. Like the dude has grinded and made a name for himself, like from the trenches of like writing monthly comic book long form run series. That was a lot of words, a lot of adjectives, but you get my point. This dude is a seasoned writer. Now I want to shift gears and now I want to also give credit to the art team as well, because Andy Kubert. What words come to mind when you think of Andy Kubert, Greg?
Oh, he's like from a pedigree family of illustrators.
Comic royalty.
Yeah, you got Joe and you got Adam, and their school of art that he's teaching at right now. I mean, if you're a kid in the 90s, you know that name. It's just synonymous with comic books. It's like just like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Like those are just the names that appear on your comic book Mount Rushmore. By default, they've just been chiseled into the history of it because they've just had a huge impact on, honestly, how comic books look and feel and flow. Like they reinvented, maybe not reinvented, but they definitely created a style that everyone either consciously or subconsciously kind of either rips off or pays homage to. I mean, you don't start your own art school because you like to draw. It's just a passion of yours.
Yeah, I think you could have stopped at the art school, right? It's like this guy is so good. This guy is so good. His family, he comes from a family that draws so good. They teach other artists to be as good as them, right? Ed, what about you, man? What words come to mind about Kubert?
Oh man, he's like I said, he's really good. He's not, just because of my aesthetics and tastes, he's not my favorite, but I can't deny he's talented and good. And like I said, he survived the 90s when everyone was drawing like McFarlane and Jim Lee. His style was on par with those guys and kind of survived without him having to change his style, And I think he's technically, like, almost like if you want a house style, like his stuff is, I think when you ask somebody like what a comic book looks like, you'll see his art. It's like, oh, this is, everyone's in proportion, not too stylized, but just super, super solid. I think even more technically proficient than Adam and his dad. I hate to say it because I love Joe Kubert's Sergeant Rock stuff. I had a ton of those as a kid.
Yeah.
But like, he's just a solid guy, and his work fits perfectly with superhero stuff. Like that's a guy you want doing big cinematic superhero work like Flashpoint.
Yeah, I think he is I couldn't think of anyone else that could draw this series. Like he did the damn thing in this too. Like this is, you're right. It's
great.
You couldn't think of anyone better to draw Flashpoint or any superhero comic book than Andy Kubert. I've always, to me, he's kind of like a drummer in a way. Like he'll find a pocket and he'll just stick to the pocket, and it's consistent from like issue 1 until the very end. In this case, like all 5 issues are super strong all the way through, like consistent from panel to panel, from the biggest splash page to the smallest little corner to the smallest moment. It's just very consistent artwork. He's very technical, and like I said, he'll find like a pocket. He'll be able to tell you like a consistent visual story, and then he'll hit you over the head with like the fucking drum solo, and it's like this epic splash page, man. Like Andy Kubert is a rock star.
I think that's the thing about house artists, though. That's why they get those jobs. They're just like, we need someone who can be consistent, on time, and is dynamic.
Yeah.
I'm going on a ledge here without doing too much I'm you know what? I'm pulling a Barry Allen, and I'm just making a brash statement here. But Andy Kubert might be one of the most consistent artists of his career,
his generation,
or career wise, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
like the
definitely.
dude has been drawing comics for me since like the 90s.
He's
right?
still drawing,
if not before that. And to your point, he's still drawing, and it's still really good. And when you look at some of his peers and contemporaries who have been drawing as long, and I won't name any names, but there's a few now where you're like, man, that are constantly being compared to their old stuff.
Right.
They don't draw as well. I mean, shit. We talked about it last episode. I guess I said I wasn't going to say names. But and this is no shade to them. I mean, I like all of them. Your Frank Millers, your John Romita Jr.'s are the most immediate ones that come to mind. And in regards to fans bitching, complaining, or being critical about their work today versus, the prime stuff. I don't think Andy Kubert falls in that line because he's good at what he does. I think he can do this stuff with his eyes closed.
Yeah, he's had longevity and consistency. Like you're right, is key, and he's never followed trends. He's been his stuff. You can look at it and think, oh, could be from 1995, or this could be from last week.
Yes, you can tell the timeless.
It's timeless.
It is a timeless style because a lot of times these stylized guys, their work looks dated. It gets, it'll look dated after a while, or that's a 90s look, or that's a, as much as I like Todd McFarlane, I'll see a lot of his stuff and it's like, oh, that's like 92, bro.
For sure.
It's like totally.
They defined a generation, and I think Andy Kubert's artwork kind of has always fit in regardless of generation.
He's kind of like that blue collar guy. He's just coming in, working,
draftsman, technical.
He's not wanting to. I mean, he's already, the lineage is there, so he's not trying to build empires like Uncle Todd. He's or Jim Lee. He's not trying to. Jeff Johns was good, and then he just disappeared all of a sudden. Now that Jim Lee's president,
I should probably. And this is not the episode of the Jim Lee conspiracy.
All right,
but I should have mentioned on the topic of the Kubert lineage. I don't know who's. Maybe is it Andy's daughter or is it Adam's daughter? But their daughter, is it Emily Kubert?
Mm-hmm. They're doing a book on Image right now, I think.
Yeah, even
oh wow, I didn't even know that.
even the next generation of Kuberts are that good at drawing. So I didn't mean for this to turn into an Andy Kubert artist spotlight, but I'm here for it. All right. Let's. I do want to give a big. I do want to put a spotlight on Alex Sinclair and Sandra Hope, the colorist and inker respectively, because I feel like they both knocked it out the park.
Right.
And they really should be brought up more for their contribution. I think just in general, inkers and colorists sometimes get they're a second thought compared to the writer and artist, and I want to make sure that we continue to we do our job of putting a spotlight on the entire creative team as well. But Alex Sinclair and Sandra Hope, the inks and colors in this were phenomenal. If Andy Kubert set up the if he brought the actors and the in the stage, they brought the lighting, the soundboard. They brought everything else to make this a complete blockbuster. There are some splash pages in here that feel absolutely cinematic. One in particular is when Barry wakes up in this new world. He's a little, he's confused. He's running around, and he runs into his mom, and they have a moment where they hug, and it's a full splash page. It's right there in the middle of the police precinct. The lighting on that looked like something from a Broadway play.
It was cool lighting for sure. Yeah, lots of. Yeah, it is
ambiance and emotion. Yeah.
Great package, a great team to bring this together for sure.
Well said. Yeah, this is. I think. Long story short, the creative team on the Flashpoint is a prime example of every piece of the comic book puzzle all working together at the top of their game for a magnificent product. Moving on, how about we actually talk about all right, moving on, I want to hear, how did it sit with you guys? Did you like it on for your second reread? Any standout issues, panels, pages, or moments that come to mind? Greg, take us away.
Yeah, this event did something that was kind of unique. If you just look at the Flashpoint 1 through 5, which I know is hard because there's so many different avenues you can go. If you just look through Flashpoint 1 through 5, It told a pretty standard story because you only get an allusion to what's going to happen in the future, like in the last 3 panels of the last issue. And that's totally different than what happens in events nowadays. They try to give you too much exposition too quickly. But Flashpoint, 1 through 5 is like kind of a beautiful story about trying to solve a problem in this alternate, main timeline that we're in. Just like a fun detective story, told in this grand way that has huge repercussions that we don't even know about yet. Hint, hint, the New 52. And I thought it was just like, if you just stick to issues 1 through 5, it's kind of awesome just seeing it blossom and just like show itself. And like when you find out that Barry Allen is the real reason for all this happening, you're kind of just sitting there just like, what the hell? When did that come from? And it was just so cool watching it kind of unravel like that. And I think we've gotten away from that with current Marvel and DC because for whatever reason they're trying to sell variant covers, they're trying to sell issues. There's different things we could probably talk about, but it's just like the nuance and the poetry really isn't there anymore. And I think Jeff Johns was more concerned about telling a concise and fun story than just like a big payday for someone.
Well said. I can get behind that. I'm gonna go. I agree with you. A majority, I think 80-20. I agree about 80%. What I'll say about my 20 is my first time I read it, I thought it was edgy, beautiful artwork, cool alternate takes on characters. I would have told you then this is a 10 out of 10 book. But that's because I had read some of the other Splinter stories and some of the spin-offs. I would say reading it today, minus the rose-colored glasses, and having a lot of stories under my belt and having read a lot of comics, I think this lacks just a little bit of the emotional punch, and it feels a tad anticlimactic because so much context is needed for the time traveling elements of the story.
Sure.
Like the pacing, it's I guess it didn't dawn on me then, but I found it interesting reading it now that it was only 5 issues for the core story. When you're used to maybe 6 being when you're used to 6 being like usually the minimum, and then sometimes 12 being the maximum. And a lot of times 12 is like way too much, and you're like, they should have wrapped it up at 7. And then when you have it too short, you're like, it needs another issue. I'm gonna say I do wish it had another issue to let it breathe a little.
Yeah, sure.
Because I thought the reveal with Eeyore Thawne or Reverse Flash showing up the last issue felt just a little lackluster, because he shows up and he's like, surprise, it's you, Barry Allen.
All you.
And
Memory punch.
Yeah, and let me explain why it's you. And it's a lot of context, and they're having a fight. It's like Barry fighting Reverse Flash, and Barry's like denying it. He's like, there's no way I did it. And he's like, I'm going to explain to you.
Yeah.
And it feels like a lot of talking head, and it takes, I think, the focus out of the action.
Yeah.
I think that could have been delivered in a different way.
And and I'm just to hop on that, and it's that 2-page to where it explains why what seemingly one person's death is having this big of an effect. And it's done in those 2 pages where, like I said, I'm looking at it from just this. If this was a standalone thing, these were like 60 books, there was like 50.
You're right.
I mean, I understand
5 issues out of 60 is a terrible ratio.
People are starting to get mad now. Let's tidy this up. But if this came out today as like a standalone thing, I think 12 issues, please, to like flesh it out more. Yeah. But not reading the other tangential things, the Booster Gold and the one shots and all that stuff, and not reading it during that time, this, like I said, this is great. But I'm not a big fan of having to read 60 books for one story. That's fair. For one event that's basically going to start from scratch. So essentially meaning what? So, but yeah, I think it's a bit just in this current viewing, like I totally agree with what you're saying. Like it is just, man, this is a lot crammed in here. And I wish there was some more room to breathe and some more explanation and some more, like I said, some more emotional beats, letting things breathe a little more. But to go to the positive things, I do love multiverse stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I do love the C-list characters they bring out, and like it's like, oh, Demon and Grifter are on the team. That's weird.
That's the best
like-
part of like these post-apocalyptic alternate
Yeah.
realities. Is you're like, finally, this Z-list
Like
character.
Shazam's like 5 kids jammed together.
That was
Like,
the most fucked up thing. It's like they Voltron up to make Captain Thunder or something. You're like, what is this?
Why did that have to be all of them?
Like, how does that work? Like,
a Voltron. Voltron literally formed out of miners. Is
And
crazy.
just the thing too, as far as like just going over stuff, like you have a boat with like Clayface and
Deathstroke.
Deathstroke, and they just get done in like a panel.
Yeah.
It's like, what? I would like to see more of this, more of a something with these main top tier villains. But we have Grifter and we have like Element Woman, who is a amalgamation of at least 3 or 4 people. I don't even know. It's like, is this Destiny and Metamorpho and Poison Ivy mixed together? Who is this? And then Dime Store Enchantress with her Halloween store.
Oh,
whoa.
Yeah.
You put some respect on Enchantress' name, because she was probably one of my favorite characters.
She's like,
she was a badass.
I'm on their side now. Ah!
She was kicking everyone's ass.
And
That was-
she's the mole.
And I guess I can't ding them too much, because it's like, well,
Yeah.
this is why we have these split off split offs in these other. This is why we have so many spin-off series, is because we don't have time to make this core issue 64 issues. But I do feel like if they would have had one more issue, or just spent just a little more time on this world, like letting me feel like, get a sense of like the drama behind it. Because they kind of gloss over like what the beef is between, Emperor Aquaman and Wonder Woman. They kind of
slept together.
but they don't explain it in this core issue, right?
No.
I don't think so.
Mm-mm.
No, they explain it.
I'm
I think
thinking
in the,
of the cartoon they do.
I think they either explain it in the Aquaman spin-off series or the Wonder Woman. It's like, for you to get all these pieces, you got to go into all. And right, and that's kind of like, that's always been our gripe, right? That's usually like all of comic fandom's gripe and bitching is like, why do I need to buy all these issues to get the complete story? But I feel like maybe one more issue or even 2 would have helped this one kind of let it breathe a little more. Because for the most part, I guess for the most part, you just get a very high level introduction to the world, and I would have wished for just a little more context for like the big for the big conflict. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the conflict is the internal issue with Barry. But I feel like you just spend so much time with Barry and Batman instead of like the world, right? Barry is in a chair getting struck by lightning, not once but twice.
I do like that. Just like, let's set up this electric chair on top of your mansion.
Yeah.
Let's make Barry into
Just like
bacon.
charred remains. Like they did the sequel, the Flashpoint last year. They did a new Flashpoint series where
Flashpoint Beyond.
Flashpoint Beyond, and then
I wanna check
basically
that out.
he grabs Barry Allen from his world and puts him on a skyscraper, and he just zaps him into a skeleton. He's like,
Because that didn't work out like how he wanted.
He's like, come on, you're the Flash. What are you talking about? He just puts him on this skyscraper, and then like that was my favorite panel. He's just like a skeleton and smoking like a cartoon.
Now the last issue where Barry is talking with his mom, and he's like, look, I flubbed up. I've got to go back in time to stop me going back in time from stopping you from dying. And he's like, I thought that was really heartfelt, like his mom even being like, think of all the other people that that don't get saved or end up dying.
Right.
Jeff Johns has a way of just writing really heartfelt, compelling conversations, and if it involves a mom, it's a wrap. You're going to be crying at the end. If it involves parents, Jeff Johns is the man for it.
I'd put up a little more of a fight though if I was the mom. It's like, so what now? So what?
Yeah.
What?
Only 40 million? I mean,
So who's gonna kill me?
I'm worth 40 million. She's like, I'm worth
yeah.
40 million.
I will make you your favorite cake every day, Barry.
Yeah. But as far as artwork, as far as the novelty of it, how fun to see the different takes on the characters are. I guess it serves its purpose, where it's the core story to get you from point A to point B into this new world, and you have the option of going into any of the splinter groups where you thought the Superman, because Cyborg, they go to Cyborg, Batman and Flash go to Cyborg to free Superman.
Right.
Well, Superman is like what in like 4 or 5 panels in this
Right.
core issue, but I know he's got his own spin-off that goes into more detail of how he got
I love when
caught.
they get outside, he just flies away like a pet bird. He just, he just flies away. Oh, there he goes.
Yeah.
See ya.
Yeah. You can spend all the time you want in this world if you want to dive into the other 60-plus series, or you could just read this core. I still think you can read this core issue and get a solid story like Greg was saying. I think at its core, it is a solid story, and you don't have to go deeper, but I think if you want to really feel like you lived in this world, it kind of behooves you to at least check out like the main character, like your Aquamans and your Wonder Woman spinoffs and those.
Yeah, it's a tough recommend for like a new reader. You know, this might be a bit much to like understand what's going on. This is a lot of like especially a lot of different takes on characters you may not even know.
Yeah. Right.
But it's like so that you don't get that like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, if you fail,
You know.
time travel class every time, if you get an F in time travel, this might not be your cup of tea. All right, did we learn anything new about Flash from this story? Were there any major takeaways? Were there any other character arcs that you guys might have found interesting, Greg?
I mean, I'm not really a huge Flash fan to begin with, so I mean, I always knew he could run fast, so I didn't really learn much different from that. I did,
Still doing that.
But did you know he could run so fast that he can go back in time?
I know that now. And I think that was cool was in doing the research in the New 52 Barry. He's also super fast at thinking now. Like they changed his power set a little bit. Where like not only am I fast, but like I'm also really smart because I can like think fast too. And like I think that slight tweak in his like power set was really interesting and kind of took the character to another dimension. Because I mean, think about it. If for the Justice League, everyone's just like, oh, Batman and Superman, and like they're like the most powerful. But like, can they go back in time and like totally fuck up the future, I think there's a conversation of like, is Barry Allen potentially the strongest or most powerful Justice League member because he can do the most damage without anyone even knowing?
And then he's always kind of treated as like a goofball. Like
totally.
Before that too, he's always kind of like the goofy,
The
the clown.
dude is a
comic.
forensic scientist.
I know.
You
He's like, this guy's smart. He's not a dumb fast guy.
Yeah, I don't think I learned much about Barry because I read Jeff Johns' Flash run, and I loved it, even though that one was more so about I believe that was more so about Wally West, if I'm not mistaken. But I will say, learning the true potential and I guess the true potential capabilities of Flash's speed was pretty cool in this. Like this is, it's like, you want to know how fast he goes? Motherfucker can punch a hole through time and fuck everything up, That's how fast
That's how we
is.
do.
Yeah. But I think outside of Batman, I think is the obvious pick, outside of Flash, is the obvious pick for best character in this Batman? Or is Batman like the best character in this?
Ooh.
Thomas Wayne Batman.
I don't know. I always thought like the emotional story, Batman had the most emotional one when he got the letter from his dad.
The letter, yeah.
That was pretty badass.
What
Great
did
ending.
crazy ass Thomas Wayne write though? I couldn't imagine him writing a sincere letter at his mental state.
Every lottery number
It's like
for the last 20 years.
it's like the almanac from Back to the Future.
Yeah.
All right, bet on these teams.
Yeah. It's like, Dad, if you want to do me a favor from the future and write me something, write me the lottery numbers, all right? Just write "love you" on the bottom. I'll get the point.
Yeah.
But, help me out
This is
here.
a bunch of scribbling and like I think
Yeah.
poop stains on this. What is this, Flash? That's from your crazy dad from this alternate timeline.
I do
that
like
was
how
my fault.
I do like how disheveled and just desperate and just downtrodden this version of Batman, even though like the regular Batman is usually, you could apply the same adjectives as well, but this version
Yeah, he's
of Batman, Thomas Wayne, really did, obviously did not take the loss of his son and wife lightly at all. I mean, he ends up becoming Batman himself.
And the wife becomes the Joker.
Mm-hmm.
Martha.
And oh shit, that's right.
Yep.
See, that's something that having just read the core issues, I wouldn't have known.
Yeah, they don't
that's
tell you
a
that
really
for
cool
shit.
plot. Damn, I forgot all about that. That's right. She becomes the Joker. So because the story goes, what, it's Bruce that gets killed that night that they're leaving the theater, and the grief turns Thomas Wayne, the dad, into Batman, and she becomes the Joker. That's right. I forgot about that. Wow, yeah, Thomas Wayne all day. That is a hella interesting story. And I wonder, and it's fascinating from the age perspective too, right? Like Bruce loses his parents at a very young age, and like that is, for the most part, that's his whole life going forward. That is like a cataclysmic like moment for him. It's what makes him vow to become like, this crime fighter for the rest of his life. But Thomas Wayne is already an adult, right? Like he's already had a kid. He's already like past a certain point. So for him, it's like there's no opportunity to really, I guess, like heal. Like there is nothing for him to, you know what I'm saying? It's just, I guess like it's an interesting, there's interesting similarities, but the differences, this minor differences, I think in the characterization is really fascinating to look at. What about any other characters that stuck out to you guys? Any different takes that you guys enjoyed?
I mean, I just like it when like we get these topsy-turvy interpretations of characters you already know, and like to see Deathstroke as like a pirate with Clayface, you're just like, oh, that's kind of fun. And like you just get like, I think it's just fun for the creative team to be like, what if we did this to like, what if Superman was like really skinny? And they're just like, make it happen. And then like, I just like the weird tweaks to like the normal that we're used to. That's what I really enjoy about this, and like metal and death metal. It's just like the fun, crazy shit that you get to see.
Yeah. The Superman, the imagery is just so jarring.
Oh yeah, it really
the
fucks
weird
you up.
stick body. Yeah, it's like
Skinny, awkward.
Yeah.
It's very alien-like.
Yeah, so that was,
And a wussy.
I don't know. He stomped the Enchantress to
True.
goo.
And he then
He's like
when
lasering
he
people.
Yeah, exactly. When he first gets broken out of his prison, he ends up taking some dude's arm off with his laser eyes.
Yeah, and I think the cartoon, because I'm getting a lot of it mixed up too, because I watched the animation as well,
I need to watch the animated
which
series.
I think is a more streamlined, like I think more accessible fan or new comic fan friendly. Everyone's super jacked in it. It's crazy. Everyone's super jacked. Little heads, giant bodies. I think he lasers off Aquaman's arm in it.
Oh damn!
Oh hell
It's
yeah.
pretty nuts. Yeah.
Speaking of like the minor tweaks, there is some minor tweaks in this that make sense too. Like or Jeff Johns manages to amplify like these minor these interesting like characteristics of like Aquaman, for example. Like he ends up becoming Emperor Aquaman. Like he rules the Iron Trident in this case, a Golden Trident. Which is like more so. Which is a polar opposite of the characterization of him, right? Like that's more. You would expect that from Namor. Like that's Namor's characterization, like default, right? Like I want to fuck the surface world. I've got an army for that. So I thought that was an interesting take. That the Aquaman I am familiar with is like a lot more lighthearted. He's like a good king, like your King Arthur type characterization. And in this one, he's just straight. He's got no room for shits at all. He gives zero fucks. Mm-hmm. And same thing with Wonder Woman, but hers wasn't as polarizing, right? Like that is a characterization of her in this story that you could see happening under the right circumstances, like her rallying up her Amazonians to like take over man's world. So I thought that was an interesting. I thought that was cool to pitch put them against one another. The fact that they have like armies and kingdoms that they're over. That by default they're good people, but it's so easy for them to like become like these very violent rulers. So
yeah, they like flooded Europe or half of Europe, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's like of course it's a blur, but I know it's probably in another miniseries or something. But it's just like, oh, we flooded, Western Europe. What does that mean? That's like a lot.
Who needs it?
Why did you just flood everybody? What's going?
Yeah. All right. So how about we go and shift gears to talking a little bit about the movie, right? So obviously we're recording. This episode drops the Wednesday before the movie premieres everywhere. And I want to get to talking about maybe some of the parallels and differences between what we've read and what we've seen so far in the trailers and such. I'm gonna kick it off by reading the premise for the movie as it's being advertised. It goes, worlds collide when the Flash uses his superpowers to travel back in time to change the events of the past. However, when his attempt to save his family inadvertently alters the future, he becomes trapped in a reality in which General Zod has returned, threatening annihilation. With no other superheroes to turn to, the Flash looks to coax a very different Batman out of retirement and rescue an imprisoned Kryptonian, albeit not the one he's looking for. So, let's get, even if it's low-hanging fruit, what are some of the, So based on that and then the trailers that we've gotten, I want to hear, what are your thoughts and expectations going to the movies? Are there any noticeable parallels and differences that we can pull from just what we know so far? Ed, how about you kick that?
I'm curious with the Michael Keaton, because I remember when it was rumored, it was like he was going to be Thomas Wayne, since he's an older guy now.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't look like that. It looks like he's just another version of Batman. And then like what we talked about earlier, where, because I just saw the last trailer they released, it's like, it's not the same timeline, but he's kind of, it may be the same timeline, but he's basically seeing a version of himself, another version of himself, because he tackles him before he comes in to see the folks.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. I do like the Superwoman. The Zod thing is interesting kind of change. I wasn't expecting Zod to come back. Or I'm not sure what Zod means in this movie. So and it looks very interesting, and I've heard good reviews about it, but it's going to be a lot different. It's going to be, I don't think you should expect the Jeff Johns version. It's going to be.
This is not a 1-for-1.
They take like the inkling of that idea and then basically change all the pieces to the puzzle.
Greg, what about you, man? What are some of your observations?
Well, to talk about the Superwoman thing, I think we are going to get kind of a story like we got in Flashpoint with Superman. She does seem like she's breaking out of a building, so I don't know if she was kidnapped and then. Maybe that explains why General Zod is there. Like, if no Superman existed, he could come and, start destroying stuff. So maybe she's being held captive. Seeing, Michael Keaton's Batman was cool. I don't know where that's going to fit in. I think that's just a fun way to sell tickets to people who are fans.
It's absolutely DC, I guess Warner Brothers in this case. It's actually it is absolutely the movies, the studio's break-in-case glass emergency plan, right? It was
Keaton, get over here.
Everyone loves Michael Keaton.
Squeeze into
Put him back in.
Suit. And you can't turn your neck. I do like the
cool thing about Ezra Miller. Michael
they
Keaton.
Had that probably softens that blow for sure. I mean, they had this awesome Flash this whole time, and they just stuck with this guy.
Yeah,
despite everything. It's like, we can't shelve every movie, guys.
It does seem like the overall. It does seem like the overall theme of time travel and the butterfly effect that comes with it is going to be pretty prevalent, right? It's still Barry traveling back in time to change events. It looks like it's the motivation is still saving his mom. Obviously, there is no Reverse Flash in this universe or in the movie universe, so it's
maybe
true. Maybe you're right. You're right. Yet
I'm hoping it's Gorilla Grodd in a Flash suit. That would make me sad.
Oh man, I'll see it twice if that's the case.
Gorilla Grodd is Reverse Flash.
You're right. That would be a welcome surprise. But
Oscars.
I'm here for Gorilla
movie
Grodd.
of the year.
That would be a welcome. That would be Reverse Flash would be a welcome surprise, but at the same time, you're like, and now what are you guys going to do with him? It's like James Gunn is about to erase all this shit. But but back to what I was saying, it does, as far as Barry going back in time to save his mom, that seems like that's still going to be the case. But Ed, you pointed out some of the differences. This doesn't seem like it's an alternate. Well, I'm sorry, I guess we can't tell if this is like his universe or an alternate reality. Yeah. Let me see. He's not meeting in the comic. He doesn't meet two Flashes. He's in that moment.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I guess that explains it right there. This is him going back in his past. It's not him replacing himself in the past, but his current reality. See, time travel, man. I hate having.
And
to
there's Ben
explain.
Affleck Batman in this too. Affleck Batman's in this.
Do you know
too.
how often I have to remind myself that Ben Affleck is in this movie? Because Michael Keaton is like
he's
the only topic,
overshadowing everybody?
which is crazy to think.
It's gonna
right?
be called Batman
Like,
Flashpoint.
Even in 2023, Michael Keaton
It's great.
and Ben Affleck. You know, it's like the subheading. All right, and then obviously in the comic series, there wasn't two Batmans. There was only one, Thomas Wayne. We haven't heard if Michael. Oh, I'm sorry, and we don't know if Keaton or Affleck will be playing Thomas Wayne. It sounds like they're both just reprising their roles as their respective Batman. And then Greg brought it up, but there's no Superman. In this case, we've got Kara Jor-El being played by Sasha Calle. Some other differences I've noted just from what I know so far. The main conflict is not a world-ending, or the main conflict / world-ending event isn't going to be some war between Aquaman and Wonder Woman. Even though I will say that would have been, they could have done it, and that would have been awesome.
What's his name?
Jason Momoa.
Jason Momoa.
Put some respect on.
I was just thinking about how he looks, and my mind went blank.
But how awesome
man.
would that have been
awesome.
if they would have
That would've been
incorporated
so
that
awesome.
story?
Yeah.
Like we would have seen a different side of Gal Gadot.
They could do a true reset with all the main Justice League people.
Right. It feels like they're keeping Gal
Skinny Henry
Gadot.
Cavill, like make him lose a lot of weight.
Make him lose a ton of weight.
He has like the machinist, like Christian Bale. Ribs.
Yeah. So in place of the a war between Aquaman and Wonder Woman in the comics, we're getting whatever General Zod has got going on. Similarities wise, I've got really I think the biggest similarity between the two, outside of like the time travel, is the purpose for both of these for both, right? Like the comic was to usher in this new age of storytelling, right? Because prior to that, it was from like 1985 up till 2010 was considered like post Infinite Crisis DC continuity, and then Flashpoint comes along, New 52 rewrites, all those years of continuity. Well, we're seeing that same thing with this movie. Like the purpose of this movie is to go ahead and usher in a new era of storytelling, and I think that is I don't know. I think that's a cool parallel between the source material and the movie itself.
Yeah.
That DC Studios state of movies was in such bad affairs that they're like, all right, bust out the Flashpoint. We're going to do the same thing that worked in the comics. Bring it over here.
Shut it down.
Yeah.
But they still have Aquaman movie and the Blue Beetle movie coming out, right?
Let me ask you guys this. Does it feel like those movies, to your point, we get, I believe, I don't know which order, I think it's Blue Beetle first and then Aquaman. I think Aquaman closes out the year, but does knowing that Flashpoint is the last kind of like canonical, the word? Isn't that like C? Canonical? Okay. Yeah. Knowing that Flashpoint is meant to be like the reset, and everything after this is going to be, really the only things that'll count are the James Gunn movies. And, Aquaman and Blue Beetle are kind of like the last, I don't know, I won't say hurrah, but like the consolation prize, right? It's like, also take this. It's a 3-for-1. We'll give you Flashpoint and Blue Beetle and Aquaman.
All right.
And then you guys can buy the new James Gunn stuff. Does it impact, like, do you see it impacting your, I guess, enjoyment of those movies, knowing that the stakes aren't there? Like you have to almost enjoy these movies like Blue Beetle, Aquaman as standalone movies because there probably won't be much interconnection with the larger story. Does that impact the way you guys go? Maybe does that impact you guys maybe going to see that or enjoying the movies?
If they're good movies, I want to see them. Yeah. I don't really. I've never been a continuity, freak about stickler. There you go. I've never been. A good story is a good story to me. There's 20 Batman comics out now. There's no way this guy can do all this stuff. So it's they're either Batman or related to Batman somehow. That's DC's new business model. As long as they're good story, like MCU did something I think a once in a lifetime thing. And I don't think you can't forcibly, like DC has done, forcibly replicate that. It was just magical. You went different studios owning the rights you created this 10-year, Infinity Gauntlet storyline, and you can't do that again. It's like there's that, at least not
hell, even Marvel Studios can't seem to do that again.
You can't. I mean, the stakes, you can't Like, I don't want the first movie, you fight Darkseid the first movie and that's it. I wouldn't mind a little bit of that, but they can be tangentially related. But if it's a good movie, I'll see it. If it's if it's a quality movie, like in comics, if it's a quality comic, I don't really care about continuity. That's why I like multiverse stuff, because I'm not shackled to this history, and all these events and things. I can actually, there's a little more freedom to it, which can get you in trouble, but it's nice to have those options. So if they're good, I'll see them. If they're not, then probably not. But it doesn't really change especially with DC. It's like, I guess, it doesn't really, they haven't been really, hitting them out of the park. So
I think I'm in the same boat with DC, is that I have not gone into these movies caring much about the interconnected, them being interconnected at all. Because I've just kind of accepted that they haven't done the best job of like building a holistic cinematic universe, but there are some strong entries that they put out, right? And I'll tell you this much: I'll say this much: I was really impressed by the Blue Beetle trailer.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And I absolutely plan to see that. Probably more so than Aquaman. Aquaman might not be like a first day opening night movie for me, but Blue Beetle is. With the hopes that it still feels like, on the topic of like Aquaman, Jason Momoa and Gal Gadot, it doesn't seem like they're giving us a definite answer if we expect to see it. Like, it still feels malleable. Like the door hasn't completely closed on them transitioning.
Not like
into
Henry Cavill.
Oh man.
No.
Yeah, that door was closed and set on fire.
So, nope.
Yeah, but my hope is that if Blue Beetle performs well enough, maybe they'll bring him over. Yeah, and I'm hoping it rightfully deserves that. I hope the movie is good and people are like, yeah, we want to see more of this guy, because I think DC needs that. I think it needs like a young, fresh faced like superhero for like a younger audience. I think it needs Batman. A little bit of that.
A break from
Fuck
Batman,
yes,
please.
that too.
As much as I like the last one, it's like, please.
Yeah. So we kind of addressed this last topic or question I have here in regard in a way. I'm sorry. So we kind of just addressed this last topic, because this next question is in regards to maybe the biggest reason you'd be a little hesitant about seeing Flashpoint, even though it feels like no one else has been bothered by it. At least like critics and even James Gunn doesn't seem to be bothered by.
He said it was really good.
And I mean, obviously, we're addressing the elephant in the room here when it comes to this movie, and that's the main hero himself, right? The hero himself, or in this case, themselves, because Ezra Miller identifies as they, them. The Flash themselves, the lead star, Ezra Miller. Oh man,
maybe the greatest villain of all time.
Oh man,
do you think he was deep in what do they call it? Method acting.
Method acting.
The man got it, but he got it mixed up. He got it mixed up.
Yeah.
Instead of method acting as good-hearted, do the right thing, Barry Allen, he's over here as Ebor Thawne.
Yeah.
He's Reverse Flash, which means we might get. Maybe that's it. Maybe Ed, you're onto something. We're going to see Reverse Flash
him.
and all this shenanigans, these allegations, these accusations.
That would be
up
hilarious if he plays himself as Reverse Flash.
That'd be
Flash.
You'd be like, huh, okay, it makes sense.
Starting fights during karaoke.
Yeah.
This man has been a menace, all right? It's probably safe to say anyone invested in comics or is even slightly interested or aware of this movie has seen some sort of headline about Ezra Miller in the last, I think safe to say at least this past year, we've seen a lot of headlines about Ezra Miller, but I think they've started as early as like 2020, 2021. Mm-hmm. All right, this person has had many allegations and serious legal issues come up. What feels like that was the movie rollout, right? Like, instead of the trailers doing the speaking, it's been Ezra Miller headlines.
The greatest hype for a movie is his fucking allegations and misdoings.
Maybe he really subscribes to the no such thing as bad publicity. Like, yeah, it kind of is.
I'm here to tell you.
Sorry, Ezra.
I'm here to tell you right now. Any number of things you might have read or heard isn't even the tip of the iceberg. All right. Yeah. I want you to take everything you thought or heard about Ezra Miller and all of his baggage and drama, And I want you to realize that it is simply the air above the tip of the iceberg, all right? That is the air. It's not even the tip. There's a whole ass continental-sized glacier of drama and legal shit under the surface. I think he took Kanye West lyric, who's already a controversial person in saying, also a controversial person in this day and age. There's a great Kanye West lyric that comes to mind when I think of
He's
Ezra
Reverse
Miller.
Flash.
A movie with Kanye West and Ezra Miller just being shitty people would be pretty awesome. But I think about the Kanye West lyric, I feel the pressure under more scrutiny, and what I do, act more stupidly. That's how I feel about Ezra Miller.
Wow.
He had it made, and then it feels like out of nowhere, you started seeing headlines of him. I mean, where do I start, right? There's a laundry list of things like fighting with patrons at a bar, physically assaulting a woman with a chair. There's multiple allegations, really gross allegations of him like grooming minors and sexual harassment. Ezra Miller was on the run from authorities at one point, like avoiding being served papers. He was, they've been charged with felony burglary and so on and so on. There is an insanely detailed timeline of events. I shared in the outline. I don't know if you guys saw it, but that history of the Ezra Miller.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, there's there is on the Vulture website, there is an outline there's an outline of the history of Ezra Miller's controversial career. And I'll leave it to the listeners to go find that article and read it for themselves. Just make sure you carve out like a 2-hour block, because I'm telling you, Greg, did you see how much scrolling you had to do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like COVID affected us in a lot of different ways, and I think it broke Ezra Miller's brain. Like, he was like, I think there's a point where they're like, he maybe started a cult on an island in Hawaii, and it's just like, what? Like, okay, sure. Like, what else can you do?
It's
I mean,
like,
to be fair, that's a nice place to start a cult. If you're gonna start a cult,
Ezra Miller is a
Hawaii.
walking shitty person bingo card. It's like, think of the shittiest things someone can do outside of murder and genocide. It's that bingo card is pretty full, and I find it interesting that I don't know. I'm sorry. The more I read about him, the more I started to see them as like this conflicted and polarizing person of a very interesting career. You know, like on one end, early in his career, and even like still to this day, Miller has championed righteous causes. And, you know, he's been an outspoken person for the LGBTQ community. They've been vocal about the environment. They've talked about corporate greed. But then you've got like all this other stuff that outweighs any of the good that you can possibly say about the person. So I was curious, you know, on the topic of things that might impact your enjoyment of the movie or might make you hesitant about supporting this movie. Is Ezra Miller's baggage, to say to be nice about it, does his baggage impact your point of view or you going into this movie?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's you can't deny it and you can't ignore it, and it is like gonna paint it in a weird light, and it's also just like, it makes it even creepier that you just have to think about, like, why did the studio say, okay, well, it's greenlit anyway? Like, if none of the charges stuck, then we're going to use them. And it's just like, that's even grosser. Like, you get someone that does all these terrible things, and then you get this big production company that is just like, yeah, we're committed to him anyway. And it's just like, I don't like that at all, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I will be watching it and watching his performance and just being like, can I even like it? Can I like his interpretation of the Flash? And it's going to be a weird viewing experience.
This might be the first superhero movie where I don't root for the hero at all. Yeah. I'm rooting for all the other characters.
Where's the Reverse Flash?
But the Flash, you know. But and you know, so I got on that. So in addition to reading like the Ezra Miller timeline, I forgot all about. I guess the Ezra Miller controversy has kind of diverted attention from how much of a mess this movie has kind of been itself. You know, a ton of reshoots. I think I counted 4 different director changes, all of them being for like creative differences. It might not have been 4, it might have been like 2 or 3, but it was like it was a few directors that have come and gone for this movie due to creative changes. like I said, reshoots. Obviously, the pandemic had an impact on the release schedule. What else? What else did I see? I think all in all, I want to say I tallied up. It's been 10 years since this movie was announced to it being released. Like 10 years. So, obviously you're going to expect, some sort of issues of production or behind the scenes, but I don't think you would expect this level of just tomfoolery and shenanigans going on. Yeah. And then when you consider Flash as a character in a property at that for the longest time they've talked about a Flash movie since the who's the old boy that played in the TV series
Grant Gustin?
No, not Grant Gustin.
Oh,
that's actually who they should have had.
Oh, for
right?
sure.
Guys,
I don't care if they would have charged us more money for the tickets to compensate for the reshoots in CGI to put Grant Gustin in there. I'd be happy with it.
Gladly.
Because who hasn't started a fucking cult in Hawaii is Grant Gustin. Grant Gustin looks like someone that helps every person. Like a old lady across the street, that's Grant Gustin. He's helping her out, right? Little kid loses a balloon, he's climbing a tree to get it, right? That would have been a great PR move, is to just get Grant Gustin involved. But I'm talking about the original Flash from the TV show. I think his name is something Snipes.
Oh, Wesley.
Yeah. Yep. Nailed it. Got it in one. Wesley Snipes is the Flash.
I'm having a terrible brain fart at the moment, and there's
always
someone
bet on black. There's zooms across the room.
There's a listener right now yelling the name of the actor. I'm having a hard time recalling. But since the Flash's inception into the world of live action, it has not been an easy ride for him for the character to finally get a live action movie adaptation. Obviously, we've had TV shows, and the CW show ran for a while, it was successful. But as far as entering the Hollywood world, the Flash property has always been kind of a difficult characters, for lack of better excuse the pun, to get off the ground, in the movie world. So it's damn, fans are finally treated to a dedicated Flash movie. And you get a shitty person. You get all this shit happens. You get all this baggage, and it's the last one. It's okay, here's your Flash movie, and it might be the last one.
Yeah.
But it's also conflicting, right? I'm saying all this stuff, but the studio is showing you something different. To Greg's point, I know when I started seeing these headlines, I was I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm waiting for the studio to be okay, we're gonna pull a Batgirl movie move here, and we're going to go ahead
write it off
and trash this movie to write it off. The publicity isn't worth it. We don't want to have to deal with the drama and the outcry. Yeah, the outcry. But that's not been the case. If I read that there's already a second script that was written by the same guy that wrote the Aquaman film script. He wrote it just in case, if this Flash movie does well, then they've got another script. Well, then all this Ezra Miller stuff starts happening, and then I believe the studio was we're going to hold off. We're not going to go about it just yet. And then around January of this year, they were no, the movie is a go. Ezra Miller's in treatment. It started. They weren't openly being no, we support it. It's a go. It felt a little cautious, and then they hit us with the trailer, and we saw Michael Keaton, and we forgot all about
then we forgot about all the shit he did.
Yeah. And even James Gunn, Ed, you kind of hinted at it, but James Gunn has called Flashpoint one of the best superhero movies I've ever seen. And that's kind of in line with all the other early reviews and things I'm seeing from critics. They've all called this a really great movie, but no one has really addressed. I haven't seen too many people address that. Ezra Miller's baggage has really kind of impacted their viewing experience. So maybe it won't be the case here, but I was curious to hear if that's going to be the case for you guys. Like I said, I just won't be rooting for Flash.
No.
I'm going to focus on all the other factors, like the fact Ben Affleck gets to, reprise his role. We get to see Michael Keaton. I'm very curious how Sasha Calle portrays Kara Jor-El, too, as well. So, all right, gents, one last question on the topic of Flash and Flashpoint. Do you got any other recommendations for Flash reading material? Besides Flashpoint, what are some of the other Flash titles or kind of related comics that you would recommend someone check out if they like Flashpoint, if they want to dive more into this world?
Well, like I said, Jeff Johns wrote a ton of not only DC stuff, but a lot of Flash books. And then there's some Mark Waid Flash books that are really good.
Oh, yeah.
Some Joshua Williamson, who maybe wrote more than Jeff Johns. So,
wow.
I mean, if you're into the Flashpoint and that kind of resonated with you, there's a ton of great artists and writers who have done some amazing stories. So go check out those writers that I mentioned. I know Flash has one of the more wackier rogue galleries of like villains that he gets to face off with that are really cool. I think there is like a Rogue War or something like that where he just like they fight one another and they fight the Flash, which is awesome. There's a Black Label book called like Rogues where they kind of like have to team up to steal something. Like it's a rich history, and honestly, Flash could be his own publishing house of just like separate stories with all the stuff he has.
Well said. I'm gonna co-sign what you said about. I'm gonna co-sign specifically the Jeff Johns Flash run of Scott Collins. I'm a sucker for a creative team that sticks with a book for multiple issues, and that was really my deep dive and introduction into the world of Flash. By the time I finished reading the Jeff Johns Scott Collins Flash run, I was a fan of the whole Flash mythos, especially his Rogues Gallery. Jeff Johns makes you put respect on all of his wacky ass villains. Mirror Master, Weather Wizard, like all these wacky villains that were introduced, like in the Bronze, all these wacky characters that you would think would be absolutely silly. Jeff Johns finds a way to make them deadly, interesting, heartfelt, and all of that. Like it's a masterclass, and a hero is only as good as his villains and supporting characters. Some great supporting characters as well. Ed, you got any recommendations?
I haven't read a ton of Flash books. Like I said, I'm not a huge Flash fan, but a book that I like where Flash is basically one of the main guys is Darwin Cook's New Frontier.
Oh yeah,
solid choice.
Where basically Superman gets knocked out of the equation right off the bat, so you have kind of like your Silver Age characters coming to the forefront. You have like Green Lantern. It's basically like it's a Justice League book, but it's a spotlight on Green Lantern and the Flash, and I think he's used really well because you get to see him, he's seeing all these like godlike heroes, and he's wondering how he fits in and if he can contribute.
He's like, I'm just a guy that runs fast.
He says, I just run fast.
I got good Nike sneakers.
But him and Green Lantern play an integral part to ending the story. So
Ed,
that's a good one.
Ed, I don't know if you can see that, but right over there, we got the New Frontier.
Nice.
That looks like one of them Absolute editions.
It is, yeah. It keeps the shelf in place. It's so heavy. The thing is fucking thick.
It's holding up the wall.
I'm going to give one more honorable mention to one more recommendation. The Flash Rebirth. If you don't feel like reading a 20, I think the Jeff Johns run is like longer than 20 issues. It's like 40, 60 issues. But the Flash Rebirth is also written by Jeff Johns, illustrated by Ethan Van Sciver. Sciver? Yeah, Ethan Van Sciver. And that one is only 6 issues, and that one is if you know nothing about Flash, you could jump in with Flash Rebirth and absolutely probably become a fan, because I know Jeff Johns has a soft spot for the character. But Flash Rebirth is also a really good Flash series that doesn't take a lot of commitment or knowledge going in. Besides that, I think we can call the review a wrap. All right, I'm curious to see if any of the things we shared, our thoughts, opinions, etc., change when we actually see the movie. But let's get started on our next segment, which I think will go over really well for a guy like Greg that likes first issues. It's time to grab a fistful of comics.
You can either have a mouthful of teeth or a fistful of comics.
Fistful of Comics is a segment dedicated to helping all you comic-curious newbies and loyal Wednesday warriors find the best new comics, the best starting points, and creative teams that you can't afford to miss. You know that we get help from our guy, Ben Kingsbury, the owner of Gotham City Limit, Jacksonville's premier comic shop. He's compiled a list of the top 3 comics you can't afford to miss next month. He's kind of like our Miss Cleo. I need to get a little like psychic a sound effect. You know, he's like our Miss Cleo. He knows what comic books are coming out in the future and the ones that you'll probably enjoy. So like I said, he's got a list of top 3, and he's got a pretty cool theme going with the list this week. So if you're a fan of horror comics, if you like fangs and being afraid for no reason, then listen up. This one's for you. So let's get some. Sorry, let me say that again. Okay, and he's got a pretty cool theme going with the list this week. So if you're a fan of horror comics, listen up because this one is catered to you. Let's get some music going and see what he's got for us today. Music goes. All right, this first one is a familiar one because it got the cosign from Troy Jeffrey Allen a few episodes ago. So if you're one of our eagle-eared listeners, you won't be surprised that this is also on Ben's list and that he gave it a cosign. Here it is.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, Shortbox listeners. I'm Ben K, representing Gotham City Limit in Jacksonville, Florida. And here's 3 comics you should add to your pull list ASAP. There is a common theme for these 3 comics as well, horror. So buckle up and let's take it to the limit. First up, AWA Studios presents Ribbon Queen #1 of an 8-part series. When you hear the author's name, Garth Ennis, my guess is you think of The Preacher, The Boys, or maybe even his amazing Punisher run. However, Mr. Ennis penned one of my favorite stories of all time, Red Rover Charlie. Please do yourself a favor and check out that iconic story. But back to Ribbon Queen, Garth has promised a fast-paced and thought-provoking horror series 10,000 years in the making. However, if I'm being honest, they had me at Garth Ennis.
Okay, that was. I was waiting on another part. Okay. All right, so that was the Ribbon. That was the Ribbon Queen #1, written by Garth Ennis and Jason Burrows on art duty. That comes out July 26th. All right, next up. Next up, it wouldn't be right if we didn't have a DC comic on this list, and it just so happens it's that time of year for big comic events like Flashpoint to take place. So here's what DC has cooking up.
Next up, DC's Nightmare Summer Event Night Terrors #1 of a 4-part series. The good news, the event's only a 4-part series. More good news, key alert, the first appearance of the new villain Insomnia is in Night Terrors First Blood #1. I heard that straight out of Joshua Williamson's mouth himself. Even more good news, no multiversal battles or time-changing events, just good old-fashioned Nightmare on Elm Street type of horror vibes. Bad news, there are over 20 separate 2-part character series. Joker, Punchline, Batman, Superman, Nightwing, Black Adam, Angel Breaker, Ravager, and more. 20 DC characters all get put to sleep at the same time. Plus, Deadman is our narrator for this nightmarish event. Oh, and a bit of more bad news. The artwork on the multiple comic covers for this event are beyond amazing. This one might just end up terrifying your bank account.
That was good. That was really good.
I won't lie. I did not listen to that one all the way through. I was like in a rush this today, but that I wasn't sure if that's Ben, was that a pick or a warning? Like, do you want people to buy Night Terrors?
It was an omen.
All right.
That is it's a very appropriate for a Flashpoint episode.
Yeah, well said. All right, Night Terrors #1 comes out July 11th. Once again, you've got Joshua Williamson on writing duties. You've got a few artists on that as well. And last but not least on this list, if you had any plans to visit the majestic continent of Antarctica anytime soon, well, you might want to cancel that after you hear this next one. Here's another frightful pick for you. Oh, son of a bitch! I hit the wrong button.
Or did you?
It's time.
Gotta wait for this to end. Gotcha. This is the longest soundbite I've got on here, and I've got it on like a one stop. Come on. Whew. The guitar solo. All right, come on, let's go. All right, let me try that again. I'm gonna hit the right one this time. Okay. All right, and last but not least, if you had any plans to visit the majestic continent of Antarctica anytime soon, You might want to reconsider or just cancel those plans outright after you hear this next one. Here's Ben for you one more time.
And last but not least, Top Cow and Image Comics presents Antarctica #1. What's more terrifying than never returning from a secretive research station in Antarctica? Maybe having to go there yourself looking for your lost father. A new non-stop sci-fi action story, rife with conspiracies abound, set on the most horrifying place on Earth. Remember, Shortbox listeners, the truth is out there. Well, another week is come and gone, and I'm still Ben K, representing Gotham City Limit in Jacksonville, Florida. Remember, with great power comes great responsibility, and always take it to the limit.
Ben just called Antarctica the most horrifying place on Earth.
He knows something.
You know what's more horrifying than Antarctica, Ben? Is a cult in Hawaii. All right, that is just an oxymoron, and I hate it. All right, gents, we've got 3 options today. We've got the Ribbon Queen #1, Night Terrors #1, and Antarctica #1, which I forgot to mention. Antarctica #1 comes out July 12th. That'll be coming out through writers Simon Brooks and Willie Roberts through Top Cow and Image Comics. So of the 3 options, what's the one that caught your eye the most? Which one are you most interested in? Ben. I'm sorry. Greg. I'm trying to say all these names. Greg, do us the honors of going first. Which one? Which one you got?
For me this week, for the 3 choices, it has to be DC's Night Terror. The event sounds super scary and super cool. I like the idea that it's like set in the dreamscape. Doesn't have any real repercussions in the DC universe. A good thing, I know we listed a lot of bad things of this series. DC is halting all of their DC books for that whole event. So there's not going to be like a regular Batman and a Batman Night Terror. So your bank account will feel the effects, but not as much as you think. They're absolutely right. The covers are badass. I've already pre-ordered a few of them myself. So all due respect to the other creators and books, but DC Night Terrors is my choice.
Hell yeah. Solid. Ed, what about you?
I'm going to go with the Garth Ennis Ribbon Queen. He's doing it for AWA, and I liked his last series. I like Garth Ennis, just anyway, but his last series, the Marjorie Finnegan Temporal Criminal, man, that's some rolls off the tongue. That was a really fun series, and like I said, I'm always interested to see what he's up to. It seems like a little bit different than, I can't say his usual fare because he does writes pretty much every genre. So I'm hoping it kind of goes into like this with AWA. He's kind of doing some different things than his I hate superheroes and war stuff. So
good stuff. All right, I guess it's going to be an even a 3-way tie or 3-way split amongst us because I, despite Antarctica being the most horrifying place in the world for Ben,
ice.
I'm pretty interested by this comic, Antarctica #1. For starters, the cover looks awesome. Secondly, it's a new creative team. I'm not familiar with Simon Brooks or Willie Roberts at all, and that intrigues me because these, especially of a new #1, right? So you got a #1, so the barrier to entry is very low, and then it's a new creative team, so I've got no like biases or anything to going in. So I'm going in like completely fresh, and I always welcome that with comic books because when you've been reading this long, you've already got, at least for me, I guess personally speaking, you go in with certain expectations. You might see a cover or a title or a premise, and you're already like, it's just going to be anything like XYZ. And this looks completely kind of like, this looks pretty new. So I'm going to go with Antarctica #1. For everyone else, though, if any of those titles piqued your interest, Ben's picks will be linked in the show notes. So if you want to look into any of them a little further and make a decision for yourself, check out the show notes. And then go to your comic shop, your local comic shop, and get your pre-orders in as soon as you can. And remember, even if you don't live in Jax, you can still take it to the limit. Comics, collectibles, and exclusive variant covers you won't find anywhere else are available on GothamCityLimit.com. Big shout-outs to Ben for the list this week. And with that being said, Greg, I think our time together comes to a close, my friend. You have been a fantastic co-host.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wish I could run back in time and start this episode all over again. I've had a killer time here with you guys. Thank you for having me on. I really, really appreciate it.
Greg, are you saying that you would run back in time to stop you from, like, it's like you taking the
Don't
place
do
of
it.
yourself.
I would stop old me so I could take his place and start it again, even if it meant Western Europe would be underwater and millions of lives would be lost.
Oh, man.
It was that much fun.
That's the least
Wow.
I'd expect you to do for the short box. I appreciate that. But Greg, I'm gonna have links for First Issue Club listed in the show notes so people can subscribe to the podcast so they can follow along with you and what you guys got going on. But do you have anything that you want to share with the listeners yourself? Any upcoming episodes, special announcements, parting words, et cetera, et cetera?
Upcoming episodes, we're going to hit episode 300 within the month. And we got a fun show for that planned. Every big monument or milestone episode, we do what we call an improv, a joke show. Like every Halloween and Christmas, we do one. So 300, we're going to have just a fun, goofy show, which we really enjoy doing. It's kind of crazy that we're hitting 300. We started this show 2015 thinking it would last maybe a month, and we're still doing it this many years later. So it's been really fun. But yeah, if you want to get more First Issue Club, go to our website, firstissueclub.com. We're on every social media you can think of: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you like to use, we're probably on it. And then of course we have a Patreon, patreon.com/firstissueclub. Other than that, I'll send it on to you.
Hell yeah, Greg. I'm going to check out that 300. Congrats,
man. That's a big number. That's a big
Thank you.
achievement.
Oh, yeah. And if you're watching on the YouTube, this is where we say goodbye as well. And this is where I recommend you hop over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast to hear the rest of the show. If you're already there, don't go nowhere. Next up, we're going to announce the winners of our Boom Studios comic giveaway.